Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, and Oakland, California.
The movement right now is that Black Lives Matter.
Why Americans can't talk honestly about race.
It's time for us to make more progress than we've made.
The last few weeks, I felt a burden of personal responsibility, not about the company, but about what's going on in America. I mentioned to a few people this morning that I just felt like we should come together and provide some opportunity to discuss this as a group of people. I don't feel, candidly, that just staying quiet as a company and staying quiet in this building is who we are and who I want us to be. As I said, I don't know where this will go, but I don't have much more to say. I want to open it up to anyone who would like to share, anyone who wants to make a comment, or anyone who has an idea about what Starbucks Coffee Company should or could do.
I have two boys, and I had to explain to them as of late what are they seeing on TV and how they should behave. The current state of racism in our country, it's almost like humidity at times. You can't see it, but you feel it.
I'm very touched, moved, and inspired by this conversation. This is why I joined this company 10 months ago, because we have the courage to talk about the things that matter for humanity.
It wasn't until I was about 12 that I was told that the racial slurs were wrong. And I used them. I took my cues from my family. And they were older generation, and for them it was segregation, it was African Americans not even being people.
As a mother of a 6-year-old, with everything that's going on, I didn't think that I'd have to tell a 6-year-old about racism at this point.
When I moved to New York, I met my wife, we got married, and my wife is from Trinidad. But when she met my parents didn't understand Trinidad. All they saw was she's black. Now we have kids, so when my parents come to visit, I can see how they look at my kids different than they look at my nephews and nieces.
In 2005, right here on Astor Place, I was beat by five white cops. They beat me so bad, I couldn't open my eyes. And I woke up the next day in a jail cell. I had no idea why I was beat, what was going on. I had so much hate inside of me. I hated these cops. And then one day I woke up and I decided I needed a job. So I started looking on Craigslist, and I found Starbucks. And I need to say thank you, because Starbucks saved my life. When I started working for Starbucks, I took all that hate that I had inside of me and I turned it into passion.
If we could somehow teach empathy in the curriculum, where you're constantly being forced to talk about differences and sharing, empathy with these people, I think that that's a really good start.
For me, being a Middle Eastern and with everything that's going on in the world, Starbucks is my safe zone. I come to my store and I'm not Middle Eastern. I'm a partner. And when my customers come in there, they don't see me as a Middle Eastern person. They see me as a Starbucks partner.
When we talk about not being a bystander, how about being an upstander? Are you going to interject yourself into that conversation that is intrinsically racist?
This is a much more difficult and different conversation than we've had at any other time in the history of our company with regard to an annual meeting, and certainly very different in the last couple of hours. And the question is, do we have a right to bring this into this meeting and to share it with you and discuss what we think we should do in terms of our obligation and responsibility to our people, to our communities, and to all of you. The first open forum that we had in Seattle in December was unscripted. Every open forum that followed in Oakland, Los Angeles, St. Louis, New York, and Chicago was also unscripted. But every one of them, including the one we had last week with Chief O'Toole at the 23rd and Jackson Street store in Seattle, where she and I did it together, every one of them has been exactly the same. And what I mean by that is we created a safe environment where people could share their vulnerabilities, their life experience, and I must say, at times, tragic examples of racial injustice, racism, discrimination, and there were many times where I felt I had to fight back the tears in what I was listening to and what I was trying to absorb. What do you do when a young man in St. Louis, an African-American young man, stands up in front of 300 people and says, I made it to 20 years. I don't know if I'll make it to 21. You can't be a bystander when you hear that. What do you do when an African-American single mom in New York stands up in front of another 300 people and says, before my 10-year-old son goes to school, I make absolutely sure he doesn't have any bright clothes on. And I turn and ask her why. Because I don't want him to draw any attention to himself. And I turn to the white woman next to her, and I say, do you have children? She says, yes. I said, have you ever worried on any level what your kids were wearing to school? What I learned in this emotional journey over the last few months was the great need for empathy, compassion, understanding, and metaphorically trying to put your shoes, your feet in someone else's shoes. So the question in front of us is, what are we going to do? Over the last 10 years, we've had the benefit, I've had the benefit, of having Melody Hobson on Starbucks' board. She's an African-American woman. She has risen to the heights at the highest level of corporate America. She's been an advisor and a counselor to me on a number of issues, but specifically this issue, as I and the company try to navigate through the process of not being a bystander and effectively and respectfully trying to make a difference in the communities we serve. I've invited Melody to speak to you and share her own life experience with you. Please welcome Melody Hobson.
Thank you. Thank you. So one day, out of the blue, my friend Harold Ford gives me a call. It's 2006, and he's running for US Senate. And he says to me, Melody, I need to generate some national press. Do you have any ideas? I actually had an idea. I called a friend who had a major job at one of the national media organizations, and she said, I can absolutely help you. Why don't I host an editorial board lunch for Harold? We'll invite all of our editors. It'll be great. You come with him. So Harold and I arrive in New York. We are wearing our best suits. We look like shiny new pennies. We get to the building, and we see the receptionist, and we say, we're here for the lunch. She signals for us to follow her. We walk through a series of corridors. We're not paying much attention until we end up in this stark room, at which point she looks at us and says, "Where are your uniforms?" At that moment, my friend runs into the room. The blood is literally draining from her face. She looks at me, she looks at Harold, she looks at me again. There are no words, right? No words. And I look at her and all I could say was, "Now don't you think we need more than one black person in the US Senate?" Harold and I, we actually still laugh about this story. We still laugh about it. And, in some ways, even though it caught me off guard, I have to tell you, deep down inside, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised because of something my mother had told me almost 30 years before. You see, my mother was ruthlessly realistic. She was the kind of person where when I came home from a birthday party where I was the only black kid invited to the party, she didn't ask me the normal motherly questions like, "Did you have fun?" or "How was the cake?" My mother looked at me and she said, "How did they treat you?" No, it never occurred to me, I'm 7 years old, that anyone would treat me any differently for any reason. But she knew. And she looked me right in the eye, 7 years old, and she said, "Melody, they won't always treat you well." You see, race today is one of the most controversial and uncomfortable issues you can discuss. We've certainly seen that in the last 24 hours, right? But the one thing about it, if you bring it up in a workplace environment, you bring it up at a dinner party, it's the conversational equivalent of touching the third rail. There's shock followed by this long silence. That's been my experience. And I mean, let's face it, we have as a country dealt with racial issues for centuries. But we all know the first step to solving a problem is to stop hiding from it. The first step towards action is awareness. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about what I've seen and what I've learned so that we can be a little less anxious and a little more bold when it comes to conversations about race. Now, I know you will say to me that the election of Barack Obama was supposed to end racial discrimination for all eternity, right? Yes, that's what everyone says. And the truth is, our country has made some tremendous progress of which we can all be proud. But I work in the investment business, and we have a saying, math has no opinion. The numbers do not lie. Like the numbers that show significant racial disparities in education, in healthcare, in household wealth, income, job opportunities. Let's just take a page out of my own world of corporate America. So even though white males make up 30% of the US population, they hold 70% of all corporate board seats. Of the Fortune 500 CEOs, only 4 are black. And of the thousands of publicly traded companies that are out there, I mean thousands, only 2 are chaired by black women. And you're actually listening to one of them. The same one that was mistaken for kitchen help not too long ago. Now imagine, I have this thought experiment that I do, that I walk into a boardroom of one of the biggest companies in America. I make this up. I mean, I just play with this idea in my mind. And the company is a giant company like ExxonMobil. And you're in the boardroom and you look around the table and every single person around the table is black. You would say to yourself, what is up with that, right? I wonder when will the day come when we will walk into a Fortune 500 company of today and go into their boardroom and look around the table and see everyone is white and say, what is up with that? Now, it's true. Many of these disparities are due to, at one time, institutionalized, at one time, legalized discrimination. But I have to tell you, as I ponder all of this, as I think about it, my mother's question still hangs in the air. How did they treat you? Now, I don't bring this subject up to elicit any kind of sympathy. I am not complaining. I have exceeded in my life beyond my wildest expectations. And I have been treated well by people of all races more often than I have not. I say and tell the story about the uniforms because it happened. I state the numbers about corporate America because those numbers are real. And I talk about the disparities that exist in terms of racial opportunities in this country because they threaten to rob yet another generation of the equal opportunity that we want for all of our children, no matter where they come from or what they look like. You see, researchers have coined this term, color blind, to describe a learned behavior whereby we pretend that we don't notice race. So if we happen to surround ourselves with people who are the exact same race as us, it's purely accidental. Now, the problem is, color blindness does not mean that there's an absence of racial prejudice. In fact, I would argue color blindness means that we're ignoring the problem. Now, I will be the first one to admit to you, these conversations about race, they are difficult. They are hard. We've seen that in the last 24 hours. But isn't that kind of the point? In the spirit of debunking racial stereotypes, especially the one that says that black people don't like to swim or don't know how to swim, I'm going to tell you how much I like to swim. I like to swim so much that as an adult, I swim with a coach. So one day we're in the pool and we're doing a drill and he tells me that I have to swim to one end of the pool without taking a breath. And every single time I miss, he makes me start over. After an hour, this is hard. I finally make it. I get out of the pool. I'm grumpy. He looks at me and he says, "You know, Melody, that was not a breath-holding exercise." I said, "Well, what was it?" He said, "That exercise was to make you comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's how many of us, most of us, spend our day. That exercise was to help you deal with your discomfort, relax into it, and get through it." It's time for us to get comfortable with an uncomfortable conversation about race. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, male, female, all of us. If we truly believe in equal opportunity and equal rights, we cannot afford to be colorblind. We must be color brave. We as teachers, as entrepreneurs, as parents, as scientists, we must proactively address issues related to race. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do. Because our businesses and our products and our communities and our research, they're all going to be stronger and more vibrant with more diversity. Now, my favorite example of color bravery is my friend John Skipper. He's the president of ESPN. Now, John is a Lexington, North Carolina native, quintessential Southern gentleman. When he joined ESPN, he implemented a policy that said if there was an open job, an open position, they must always have a diverse slate of candidates for consideration. He said in the beginning, especially senior members of the team, they bristled at this suggestion. They didn't like it. And they would come to him and they'd say, "Okay, John, do you want me to hire the minority for the job, or do you want me to hire the most qualified person?" And Skipper said he always answered the question exactly the same: yes. And by saying yes to diversity, it is my belief that it's one of the major reasons why ESPN is one of the most valuable cable franchises in the world. No, he recognized diversity wasn't just about the color of faces around the table. It was about the diversity of backgrounds and opinions and ideas so that they could ultimately reach bigger audiences. He wanted the variety of viewpoints. And studies actually show that if you have a board, as an example, a diverse board, like the Starbucks board, a diverse board actually outperforms companies where the board members are more homogeneous. And I have to tell you, in my line of work in investing, when you're making an investment decision about a stock, you want all sorts of viewpoints to weigh in before you put other people's money at risk. So at Ariel Investments, my firm, we actually consider our diversity a competitive advantage. And this advantage can extend way beyond business. There's a professor at the University of Michigan named Scott Page. He is the first person to develop a mathematic formula for diversity. And he has found that if you are trying to solve a really hard problem, I mean hard, it is in your best interest to have a diverse group of people around the table, including those of diverse intellects. And he gives this great example. He talks about the fact that when the most brilliant scientists in the world were gathered together to try to solve the smallpox epidemic that was ravaging Europe, despite their tremendous efforts, they just couldn't come up with anything. And yet the person who actually made the most difference was a dairy farmer. A dairy farmer who noticed that the only people who weren't getting smallpox were the milkmaids. So the bovine-based vaccination for smallpox is owed to the observations of a dairy farmer. Now, I realize that many of you in this audience are saying, I don't run my own sports network or my own investment firm or my own dairy farm. And I know that this conversation about race has challenged us, and many times we've ignored it as a country for generations. But I do believe everyone walking this planet has the opportunity to demonstrate color bravery in their own everyday life. And I also believe that even the smallest acts can add up to make a huge, huge difference. So what do I mean? If you're a part of a hiring process or an admissions process, you can be color brave. If you're someone putting together a brainstorming session for work or school, you can be color brave. If you're sitting with a group of people at a table and you're trying to solve a really hard problem and you notice that everyone looks like you can stand up and be color brave. And if you're a publicly traded company at your annual meeting of shareholders and you decide to talk about race, you can be color brave. What I'm asking you to do is very simple. I'm asking you to observe your environment at work, at school, at home. And if you don't see any diversity, I'm asking you to work to change it. I'm asking you to actively and consciously invite people in your life who don't look like you, who don't think like you, and who don't come from where you come from. People who will challenge your assumptions and help you to grow as a person. You might develop powerful new insights about the world. Or, like my husband who happens to be white, you might learn that black people, all of us, men, women, and children, we use lotion every single day. And by the way, this challenge cuts both ways because we as minorities, we have to be color brave too. I know a lot of black people who only spend time with black people. That is not going to cut it, especially if we're going to be able to show progress as role models for the next generation. Now, speaking of role models, I owe everything to the fact that I had one of these amazing role models. Now, I told you my mother was just ruthlessly realistic, and she was. I mean, this is the woman when I was 4 or 5 years old. When I was wondering out loud what Santa would bring me for Christmas, she just looked at me and she said, "Mommy is Santa," and turned and walked away. But it might be helpful to you to know why she came to be that way. So she was a single mom in Chicago, 6 kids, and despite her Herculean efforts, I mean, I don't know anyone who worked harder. Despite those efforts, she always had a hard time making ends meet. And because of that, there were times when our lights would get disconnected, our phone would be turned off, and we often got evicted. And sometimes we got evicted and had nowhere to go, and we'd live in one of the apartments that she would be working on. She was in real estate. They'd be half completed. We'd live in 1 or 2 rooms, and sometimes they'd be so incomplete that we would heat our bath water on hot plates. And despite these challenges, she never gave up, ever. And she wouldn't allow us to give up either. Even as she instilled in us this brutal pragmatism that I talked about, she also offered us this unconditional love and support. And as important as that advice that she gave me when I was 7 years old proved to be, she also offered even more important advice to me. every single day she told me, Melody, you can be or do anything. And it was because of those words that I would wake up at the crack of dawn, and still do. And it was because of those words that I loved school more than anything. And it was because of those words that when I looked out the window of my school bus, I would dream the biggest dreams. And it's because of those words that I stand here today, full of passion, asking you to be brave for the children of today who are dreaming those same dreams. When they see a business executive or CEO, I want them to say, I can be like her. He looks like me. And be it a child in Houston or Harlem or the south side of Chicago, I want them to know anything is possible. They can reach any heights. They will be welcome in any boardroom, and they can lead any company. You see, it's not just about what we can do for them. It's about what their diverse perspectives and brilliance will do for us in the world that we live in. You see, the idea of being the land of the free and the home of the brave, it's woven into the fabric of who we are as America. In America, when we have problems, we don't shrink from them. We take action. We show courage. So I'm asking you, I'm imploring that we be bold. Let's be audacious enough not to leave anyone behind. Let's be daring enough not to leave anything on the table. Let's not be colorblind, but instead be color brave, so that every child knows that their future matters and their dreams are possible. Thank you.
So proud of you. Thank you for responding so respectfully to Melody and her message. You can see the value that Melody has given me, the board, and our company. It's hard to respond just in a few minutes, just sitting there and listening to all this and not get emotional and realize the opportunity and responsibility we have. Over the last few months, I've tried to seek out other influential people who have a greater understanding than I do of the issue of race and racial injustice in America, so I can learn, so I can get better, and I can understand what I and the company can do. There's been a person who's had a powerful voice among blacks and whites and Latinos and Asians for a number of years. The timing of his arrival here today and him winning an Oscar for co-writing the song Glory in the movie Selma is fortuitous for us. But this is an extraordinary person who's agreed to come here, and please give him a warm welcome. Please welcome Common.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Good afternoon. How's everybody feeling? Yes. First of all, I just want to thank God for this opportunity of being here. And I want to thank Howard for listening to God and saying, come here. Well, about 2 weeks ago, I was eating dinner at a restaurant with my daughter. And this 10-year-old white kid came up to me. And he said, Common, I love the movie Selma. It inspired me. And as he continued to talk, he told me the song Glory had touched him and moved him. I just wanted to hug him. I wanted to hug him. I felt him in my heart, what he had said to me. And little did he know, he had touched me just as much as I had touched him. So as I looked into his little blue eyes, I thought, this 40-year-old black man and this 10-year-old white kid, there we were. We had met up in a place of our humanity. Where in our lives can we make a human connection with those who are different than us? Well, I got a funny confession to make. For a long time, I would get on elevators, and on the elevator ride, if a white person would get on, I would feel like they didn't like me. I felt like they didn't acknowledge me, didn't know who I was, and they just didn't like me. So I would stand in my corner while they stood in their corner. But after thinking about this for a while and thinking about how I truly felt in my heart, I decided that I would speak and I would be more present. And now I must say, these elevator rides are way, way better now. It's the simple acts of kindness and showing respect for each other that are seeds that we can plant to help change the world. Simple acts of kindness. Just speaking to another individual who you may assume doesn't even know who you are, or you may assume they don't like you. But these simple acts are the seeds that we can use to help change the world. Well, as Howard just spoke earlier, John Legend and I had the blessing and opportunity to perform a song, Glory, at this year's Academy Awards. As a tribute, thank you. Thank you. As a tribute to those of the civil rights movement. As we performed, there were people in the audience who were moved, actors that were brought to tears. One in particular, Chris Pine, who you all may know as Captain Kirk in the new Star Trek. The camera caught him crying profusely. Well, later that night at an after party, I was talking with Jay-Z, and Chris Pine came up, and Jay-Z said, "Black people gonna love you." And I thought, well, why did Jay-Z say that? What did he mean by this? And as I contemplated what Jay-Z really meant, I realized he was saying to him that the empathy and compassion he had displayed in that moment meant that he would be remembered as someone who cares and is not afraid to show that they care. In return, to those who he showed that he cared, they would always show him love. That's what Jay-Z meant. It's a beautiful thing when you know someone cares for you. And it's amazing what can happen when you show people that you care. I had the blessing and the opportunity to meet with Mr. Howard Schultz. And as we ate dinner, I looked at a gentleman who really was changing my world and inspiring me. Because for a long time, I've been an advocate for just bringing people together, an advocate for raising the black community up, but also showing the black community that we must extend our hands in love. I've been an advocate just for love and humanity and courage and creativity and, you know, things to make lives better. Well, as I got to talk to Howard, I saw a gentleman sitting across from me who had extreme power, but was willing to use his power and his platform to do something great in this world, to really affect change. And I felt the sincerity of who Howard was and his heart and his real concern about him really wanting to see things change in this country, which will essentially help change this world. When I look around this room, I see people that have the desire to change the world, people who care. And if I just close my eyes and picture where I come from, I see people from where I come from who may feel and be wondering, is there any hope? I see people from where I come from who are wondering, is there anyone who cares about what they're going through? I see people from where I come from who are wondering, when is the real change going to come? But as I open my eyes, I see the change right here. You all are the ones that are using your platform to show the human connection from people that are different. You all are using your platform to show through acts of kindness and respect for one another that we can plant the seeds to help change the world. You all are using your platform to show that you care. I never thought I would be able to stand in front of a company, shareholders, and say that you care. I always believed that people in power didn't care. People, I would say, why do companies make all this money and don't care for the communities that are supporting them? Well, I'm here to witness that Starbucks is a different type of company. And I'm just proud to be able to say that I came to a Starbucks shareholders meeting and the people were real. So I just want to encourage you all as we continue to like support diversity, as we continue to connect with people who we normally wouldn't connect with, as we continue to show just the natural acts of kindness, as we continue to show we care. Know in doing so, in time, we will build a better world. Thank you.
Not only do I have to follow melody, I have to follow Common. You saw the video which captured the open forums we've had across the country. What the video didn't show is the meeting I had with Chief Bratton in New York, Chief Beck in Los Angeles, Chief O'Toole here in Seattle. And it didn't show a lot of other things that I would loosely characterize as something we all have and difficult to admit and realize, and that is our own unconscious bias towards others. If you're in those rooms, as I was, and you hear the tragedies, you hear the hopelessness, you hear the concerns, you watch the TV and you see Ferguson in New York and Cleveland, and a week ago, Madison, Wisconsin, we have to ask ourselves, not as shareholders, but as citizens, as parents, as neighbors, is this the country we want to live in? Is this the America we aspire to? Is this the American promise that we were told to believe in and count on? Is this the American dream that we've heard so much about from our parents and our grandparents, if in fact it's going to exclude somebody because of the color of their skin, their gender, their sexual orientation? And if the rhetorical answer to these questions in your own mind is no, then you realize that if we just sit here and keep talking about this and don't demonstrate personal and collective leadership, then something else is going to happen and could be a tipping point for the entire country. So the other side of the equation and the question is, what should we do? And what should Starbucks do? And my hope is that you will trust the intentions of Starbucks Coffee Company as you always have. That you will trust the thoughtfulness, the discipline, and the respect and dignity that we will have for our partners, the communities we serve, and the millions of people like Common and Melody shared with you, who unfortunately are not getting their fair share of the American promise and the American dream. So we're going to begin. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that Starbucks itself is going to solve centuries-old problem of racism in America. But I am going to tell you that we're going to try and demonstrate a level of respect, of leadership and concern that we can make a difference. So first off, in partnership with USA Today, whose management team and company is deeply committed to diversity and inclusion, we're going to start co-authoring a level of content that will provide a tool, a resource for people within Starbucks stores to understand the issues that you've just heard from Common and Melody, and you've seen in the video, and we've witnessed around the country. The content is going to be an 8-page insert beginning Friday, this Friday the 20th, in every USA Today paper. And nationwide, that'll be between 2 and 3 million copies of people who are going to receive their newspaper, and inside it is going to be a new way of understanding racial injustice, discrimination, racism, and yes, our own unconscious bias. In addition to that, that insert will be available in every Starbucks store that is company-owned. And customers can take it if they want. They can read it. They can leave it behind. They can decide. Now, about 100 million cups of coffee goes through the U.S. stores on a weekly basis. And we came up with, we think, is a very good idea to try and be a catalyst for a conversation. The program is entitled Race Together. And we're simply going to write the 2 words, Race Together, on cups. If a Starbucks partner doesn't feel as if he or she wants to write it on the cup, they don't have to. It's not mandatory. If a customer doesn't want to receive the cup, they don't have to take it. We'll make them another beverage, or we'll cover the cup up. But the point is that Starbucks Coffee Company realizes that the rules of engagement with regard to this issue in America must change. That we can't continue to talk about racial injustice as something that doesn't affect us. If you think about what's possible in the country, and if we could bring the people who are being left behind along, and we can get a level of diversity and inclusion of ideas, of talent, of excellence in everything we do, and families no longer feel as if their kids don't have to wear solid clothes, or a kid in St. Louis doesn't feel as if 20 years is going to be his life existence. And if we can stop looking at the television and seeing Ferguson and Madison, Wisconsin, and New York and Oakland, California, and say to ourselves, that's not my community. That doesn't affect me. It affects all of us. Now, there will be cynics, and there'll be some in the media that will criticize Starbucks for having a political agenda. Our intentions are pure. This is not some marketing or PR exercise. This is to do one thing: use our national footprint and our scale for good. When Beto talked about what makes Starbucks go, what builds the brand, we know it is the equity of the brand that is defined by the experience that our people are having inside Starbucks. When they are proud, they are galvanized. When they see us do something that they realize is not only good for the company and good for them, but for the community, they are energized. At every single open forum that I led, partners came up to me and said, "Howard, we must do more." It's not enough to have these small meetings of Starbucks employees. We need to get outside of ourselves and stop playing inside out and get outside and have a national conversation. And if you look at what we did with veterans just a year ago, the Concert for Valor, 800,000 people, we elevated the national conversation. Our intent is to try and elevate the national conversation. I also believe that there will be other businesses and business leaders that will join us in this, because we're willing to jump into the deep end of the pool. And I think others will follow us. So all I'm asking of you is to understand what we're trying to do, to understand our intentions, and to understand it does take leadership, not only in your core business to create profit and shareholder value, but to demonstrate your core purpose and reason for being. And this is our reason for being. In addition, the question is, what can we do with regard to the 6 million disconnected youth in America, mostly children of color, that are not in school, that do not have a job? And so we will attempt, just like we've done with the veteran community, to hire at least 10,000 opportunity youth over the next 3 years. So we brought race into the meeting, and nobody left. Nobody yelled at me. No one said it was a bad idea. We've taken you through the strategies of the company. We shared with you that our aspirations for Starbucks is much bigger, much bolder, and we strongly believe that our best days are ahead of us. I also want to tell you, we are not perfect. We are going to make mistakes. Shareholder value is not a straight line that's always going to go up. But every single day, we come to work not entitled by our success, but realizing we have to earn it every day. And we also realize that every year we come in front of you, we have to earn your respect, your respect, your support. And I hope after 23 years, we've continued to do that. Thank you very much.